Have you ever wondered why certain pains seem to arrive at the exact time you wanted peace most? Do you realize that encounters, breakups, losses, and even silences seem to follow an invisible logic? But need? What if I told you that nothing, absolutely nothing, happens by chance? I'm not speaking of destiny in the mystical sense, but of a more subtle and profound force, that of coherence between who you are and what the world returns to you. The lessons come when you are ready to hear them. The right people appear when your soul is already asking for them, even in silence. Even chaos has a purpose if you have the courage to look beyond the surface. Stoicism teaches us to abandon the illusion of control over events and focus on the only territory where freedom is total. Our choices, our answers, our gaze. Life is not a sequence of chance, it is a mirror. And everything that seems random is actually a silent attempt of the universe to awaken you. Every event is an invitation. Sometimes a whisper, sometimes a scream, but it's never in vain. In this video, we will explore 7 Stoic lessons that reveal how to transform each event of life, even the most painful, into a sign, a bridge, a chance to be reborn in consciousness. They are internal, external, spiritual, sensory, and relational lessons, each with its key, its symbol, its call. But before we start, go to the comments and write, "Today I accept what it is, and I choose what I can be." Don't write just for writing. Make it a conscious gesture, an anchor, a silent promise that you will hear every word with the soul awakens. Because sometimes all the universe needs to move mountains is that you say yes. A calm, yes, firm, present. Let's get to the first lesson. If you're ready, let me know, and we'll get started. Number 1. The chance is a mirror, not an enemy. It is easy to believe that everything is under control when the sky is clear. When the days follow predictable, and the plans fit together as obedient pieces of a puzzle. But chance has another rhythm. It arrives without announcing, like a tide that invades the beach and erases the sand castles that you took so long to shape. A news that shatters the ground. A look that says goodbye without explanation. A failure that reveals how much the foundation had already cracked. Suddenly everything that was sure falls apart, and the silence of the universe seems to mock the logic with which you tried to decipher it. At that moment, the question arises, why? Why now? Why so? But perhaps the error is precisely in this need to understand with the mind what can only be understood with presence. Stoicism does not try to explain chaos. It teaches to listen to it. And what seems random, for those who live attentively, is often the exact push that the soul has been asking for. There is no cruelty in the unexpected. There is coherence. Everything that hurts you shows. Everything that breaks you reveals. Seneca said that what hurts us instructs us. And this is not an invitation to resignation, but to lucidity. The pain that comes, as cruel as it may seem, is also a kind of language. It reveals what you have been ignoring, delaying, disguised with beautiful words and promises that never came out of the paper. Chance in this sense is not a whim of destiny. It is a reflection of your own inner rhythm. It points out what has been neglected, which has ceased to be honest, which is no longer supported in the new version that you are about to become. Think of all the times that something fell apart, and only then did you realize how rotten that was already inside. The friendship that destroyed the veil of convenience. The job that no longer fit in your values. The relationship that only followed out of fear of emptiness. Chance there was not betrayal. It was revelation. And it takes a deep courage to accept that life sometimes saves us exactly when we think that it is punishing us. But that courage is not born of denial. It is born of acceptance. From the intimate gesture of looking at ruin and asking, what in me was also about to give way? It is not the world that falls. It is what you supported without truth. And the more you try to preserve what has already been exhausted, the more chance you will need to intervene, until you learn the difference between resistance and wisdom. This lesson is a hard stone to swallow. It hurts the ego because it requires silence in the face of loss and maturity, in the face of unforeseen occurrence. It forces us to let go of control, not as one who gives up, but as one who finally understands that the map was not the territory, that the plan was not the way, that real life begins when defenses fall, and when chance comes to visit you again. Because it will, try not to run to protect yourself. Stay, listen, observe what collapses, and above all, what remains standing. What remains after the gale usually is more real than everything you built in fear of losing. So instead of asking, "Why did this happen?" it may be more useful to whisper, "What are you trying to be born in me from this?" Because as long as you breathe, there will be something to be born. And chance, far from being an enemy, can be the silent midwife of a version of you that was forgotten. Number 2, the reality you see is not the reality that exists. You can open your eyes every morning and still spend your whole life sleeping. You can go through decades believing that you see the world when you actually only repeat a distorted version of it. Every gesture, every face, every scenario, everything you perceive goes through an invisible, silent, and determining filter, your mind. And the mind, when inattentive, does not show what it is, but what it fears, what it wants, what it avoids. Most people do not see reality. It only sees the frame that you have learned to fit around it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul is dyed with the color of his thoughts." And that is not a phrase to be admired. It is a key. The color you choose, or allow, for your thoughts determines the tone with which you experience everything. If you think of scarcity, each achievement will seem small. If you think of anger, each disagreement will be an attack. If you live in alertness, even affection will seem like a trap. And when the soul is dyed with these colors, the world is no longer what it is. It is only the reflection of a mind sickened by repetition. It is at this point that many are lost, by confusing interpretation with truth. You believe that the person ignored you, that the boss despises you, that life pursues you. But none of this has been proven, only sense. And the feeling is not born of the facts but of the reading you make of them. The problem is that this reading is almost never neutral. It carries the marks of what you have lived, of what you have heard in childhood, of the frustrations you have swallowed in silence, of the pains you have never named. Think of the last time you felt hurt. Maybe it was something small, a word crossed, a thoughtless gesture. But the intensity of pain did not come from now on. It came from the accumulation of all the other times you felt small, devalued, ignored. The reaction was current, but the root is ancient. And as long as that root is not observed honestly, it will continue to color and shadow everything that could be clear. This is the blind point of our perception, the illusion that we react to the world when, in fact, we react to what the world reminds us of. The landscape changes, but the filter remains. And with it, the plot repeats. You move from home, from employment, from city, but you take the same lens together. And then you frustrate yourself saying that nothing changes. But what has not changed is the way you read each page. The good news is that the lens can be cleaned, not in haste, not with ready phrases, but carefully, with the courageous effort to observe your own thoughts as who analyzes a painting. Where did this color come from? Why did I choose this tone? Who taught me to see it like this? This investigation is not light. It requires deconstruction. But it is precisely in this effort that freedom is born. Because when the soul changes color, the world changes its outline. You begin to perceive details that you did not see before. You begin to feel gratitude where there was only demand. You begin to act more gently because you understand that not every silence is contempt. Not every criticism is rejection. Not every mistake is failure. The world expands as your gaze matures, And perhaps you still carry deep marks. Perhaps your thoughts have been dyeing everything for years with fear, haste, or self-sabotage. But know this, you are not obliged to continue with this ink. With every new thought chosen with conscience, you repaint yourself. And with this, recreate the reality that lives. Reality, in the end, is not a place. It is an intimate construction, a work in constant review, and only you can decide which colors it will have from now on. Number 3, you do not react to the world. You react to your interpretation of it. Not always what hurts us is meant to hurt us. Not always what threatens us, in fact, persecutes us. Most of the pains we carry is born not of what was lived, but of the way it was interpreted. Someone walks away and you feel abandonment. A plan fails, and you declare yourself a failure. A word misplaced, and suddenly all of its value seems to be doubted. But is it really that the world is so sharp? Or is it your reading that has read everything as a cut? Epictetus said, "Man is not affected by things but by the vision he has of them." And that vision is shaped, often without you realizing it, by ancient fears, by ill-digested memories, by expectations created in the dark. You do not react to life. You react to the versions you created of it. And that is why so much small thing becomes huge. So much neutral gesture seems attack. So much silence seems contempt. Because you do not see what it is, but what you believe that means. This construction is not your fault. It is human. The mind seeks meaning, and where there is no certainty, it invents. But this invention, when it becomes a habit, begins to dictate its form of existence. You stop listening to understand, and listens only to confirm what you fear. You don't talk. You defend yourself. You don't wait. You anticipate. And at the end of the day, you're not living the now, but reliving old pains with new faces. There is immense freedom in perceiving it. Because if what hurts you is not the fact, but the way you see it, then there is something that can be transformed. You no longer need to be a slave to the impulse. Can you observe what you feel calmly, dismantle the judgment, redo the reading? It is not a question of denying what hurts, but of asking more deeply, does this thing that I am feeling really belong to this moment? Consciousness is a gap, a space between what happens and the answer you choose to give. It is in this interval that lives your strength. And it is not a force that screams, wins, explodes. It is the strength of those who allow themselves to see more accurately, feel more honestly, act more freely. Perhaps you have never learned to do that. Perhaps you have grown up believing that reacting quickly is a sign of intelligence, that not showing frailty is a proof of courage, that being sure is more important than being at peace. But now it is different. Now you know that you can stop, that you can choose, that you can finally change the tone of the conversation you have with life. The situations will continue to arise. People will still make mistakes, walk away, deceive themselves. The outside world follows its own logic. But inside you, something reorganizes. And when that happens, even what once seemed impossible becomes bearable. What took you off the axis becomes a point of observation. What made you run away becomes a door. Because by changing the interpretation, you not only change the reaction, it changes your own story. Number 4, thoughts are food, and you are eating without choosing. The thought has no shape. It does not bleed. It does not weigh on the shoulders like a box, but it can poison the whole body. And perhaps because it is not visible, we treat it with carelessness. We let it go in and circulate as it pleases, without vigilance, without criticism, as if it were just a background noise. When, in fact, it is the substance with which everything is manufactured. What you repeat in silence becomes, over time, the raw material of your identity. Thoughts, even the shortest, are seeds. Some germinate lightness. Others, if not perceived, grow like weeds and take care of what was once a fertile field. Most people spend their days digesting ideas they didn't choose. Old phrases, family voices, inherited expectations. You learn from an early age to take care of the body, to choose food, to avoid excesses. But no one teaches you that thought also feeds, or contaminants. And that mentally repeating what decreases you is like accepting crumbs every day and calling it fate. You start the day, and without noticing, you're already eating the remains of what's left of the previous night. The fear of failure, the inevitable comparison, the chronic anxiety of not being enough. Heracles warned precisely, everything you think about yourself becomes the foundation of the world you build. This construction is silent but persistent. A recurring thought not only inhabits your mind, it begins to rewrite your biography. Gradually, you stop trying, not out of lack of desire, but because something in you has already decreed that it is not worth it. You turn away from people, not because you want loneliness, but because you have learned to expect rejection even before the first gesture. Thought sickens hope. And when that happens, everything that was possible turns into a threat. But the most treacherous in this process is familiarity. In time, you start to trust what you have always heard, even if it chokes you. The mind prefers the known, even if the known is a pain that repeats itself. And that is why ancient thoughts, even toxic, seem so true. They have already adapted to your voice. They already know the shortcuts, and they follow you through narrow routes, even when the road has already opened. Transformation begins with vigilance. It is not about expelling negative thoughts, as if they were thieves. It is about observing who you have invited in every day. What have you served your mind while facing everyday life? What do you say to yourself when it fails? When you are alone? When you do not receive what you expect? This observation, if done honestly, reveals patterns. It shows how you have always reacted in the same way, even when circumstances change. And in this recognition lies the first crack of freedom. The awareness that there are other ways of thinking, other ways of reacting, other ways of inhabiting yourself. Thinking clearly is not luxury. It is survival. And nourishing the mind with just, generous, and firm ideas is an act of preservation. It is not an immediate practice. It takes time. It requires patience with the noise itself. But every time you choose a more true thought, more consistent with who you are becoming, a part of you is free from repetition. And that freedom doesn't scream. It doesn't demand it. It just shows, in silence, that the world around it already begins to change, because whoever inhabits it now thinks like someone who deserves to be here. Number 5. Pain does not come to punish. It comes to show where the false is. No one likes the pain, but she'll be here anyway. It comes as loss, as absence, as a plan that collapses when it seemed firm. And the instinct is to shrink. Try to escape, resist, deny. After all, suffering always seems a punishment. Something to be overcome or avoided, never something to be heard. But in Stoicism, pain does not occupy this vile place. It is not an enemy. It is revealing. It does not come to break what is whole, but to expose what has been fractured for a long time. Only you still did not want to see it. Musonio Rufus wrote, "The misfortunes are great teachers, not for the pain they cause, but for the truth they reveal." And there is a brutality in this idea that requires courage because it implies accepting that pain has a function, and if it has a function, it cannot be treated as intrusive. It becomes an uncomfortable but legitimate presence, an unexpected visitor who does not ask for permission, but who, if heard, points out paths that comfort would never indicate. Because the truth, the one that really releases, rarely appears during calmness. It arises when the ground yields. Think of how many times the pain did not point to a lie that you had been feeding, the relationship maintained by fear of loneliness, The work sustained by vanity, not by vocation. The silence swallowed by convenience, when the soul was already screaming by voice. The pain arrives in these places as a beacon, not to punish, but to illuminate. Not to overthrow what is yours, but to collapse what has never been. And that's why the pain hurts so much, because it breaks illusions. It tears the fabric of the justifications that you've been sewing to survive. And what's left is not destruction, it's reality. Hard, raw, uncomfortable, but finally visible. There is, however, a choice. Not all pain teaches itself. It offers the lesson, but does not force you to learn it. You can use the suffering to close yourself, to harden yourself, to get away from yourself. Or you can use it as a starting point. As if, in the middle of the night, you realized that the house you were living in was about to collapse. And instead of crying for loss, start rebuilding now, on real ground. Stoicism does not glorify suffering. It just does not waste it. He asks in the face of loss, what was being sustained by appearance? What in me depended on that which is now gone? What is falling apart because I postponed the decision to change? You may not have control over the arrival of pain, but you have about what it will leave in you. Whether it will come out as a scar or as a seed. Whether it will be remembered as injustice or as turned. And this choice is not made in a single gesture. It is done gradually, in the way you decide to treat yourself in the midst of chaos, in the way you accept what you feel without identifying yourself with pain as if it were your only face. When suffering comes, it carries something you needed to see, even if you didn't want to. And the longer you resist it, the longer you listen, the sooner it fulfills its role. The pain doesn't disappear when it is ignored. It only changes shape. But when it is understood, it dissolves because what it needed to reveal has already been seen. And what's seen with truth, you don't have to scream anymore. Number 6. The peace you look for is not on the outside. Not always the noise that bothers the most comes from the outside. There are days when everything seems quiet around, but inside, there's a constant noise. A restlessness that nobody notices, but that it vibrates silently under each gesture. You work, respond, deliver, smile, but behind everything, something pulsates like a muffled drum. The mind does not stop. Remember what has passed, anticipates what has not yet come, questions, snakes, compares. And in this confusion, peace goes away. Not because the world is at war, but because you are. Some believe that you can only rest when everything around you is settled, when the bills are paid, when love is matched, when the body is light, when recognition finally comes. But that logic is a trap, because the world will never stop completely. And if not yours, then it's not yours. Gradually you learn, not always in the easiest way, that serenity is not born from the absence of noise. Cleante, Zenon's successor, wrote in an almost whispered tone, serenity does not come from the absence of noise, but from the ability to keep silence inside. And that phrase, when understood, displaces everything because it does not ask you to run away. It invites you to the center, to this place where, even in the midst of chaos, it is possible to remain whole. This skill is not a gift. It is construction. And like all construction, it requires raw material. What you consume, with whom you live, what you repeat to yourself daily, all this or sustains your serenity or steals it. The mind is not neutral. It feeds on what you receive. And if you live surrounded by urgency, comparison, noise, and haste, you will begin to believe that this is the only way to live. Peace then seems artificial, uncomfortable even, as if you were not allowed to silence. But the truth is that this silence is the ground where everything that matters can grow. It is in the internal silence that you can hear what is essential. Decide without hurry. Feel without running over yourself. Listen to the other without defending yourself. Realize what is really at stake before reacting. The absence of this skill is what makes people so volatile. Any setback becomes crisis. Any criticism becomes offense. Any disagreement becomes abandonment. When you did not build this space of pause inside, everything pushes you. Everything takes you off the axis. Everything requires an urgent reaction. But there is a point where urgency loses power, where you, even in the face of conflict, can look before you answer, where the world is still agitated, but inside you, there is a center, and that center does not negotiate with chaos. To reach that point does not mean to live in isolation. It means to be present without being vulnerable to the noise of everything. It means to choose what enters, and especially what remains. Serenity is manifested when the mind learns not to be confused with everything it touches. And this learning is one of the highest forms of freedom. Because having peace when everything is going well is easy, but being peace when everything is falling apart, that's strength. And it's that force that starts now, in there. Number 7, the expectation that you feed is the weight that tires you. Not always what weighs has form. Not always what tires has name. There are days when the body even responds well. The routine goes smoothly, but within you, there is a hard exhaustion to explain. It's not what happens. It's what you expected happened, and it didn't happen. The world didn't follow the script. People didn't tell you what you wanted to hear. Time didn't collaborate with the plans. And suddenly, everything seems harder than it really is. What exhausts you is not what is present, but what is missing. It is not what has been done, but what has been idealized and has not been fulfilled. You wake up with an image in your head, how the day must unfold, how others must act, how you must react. But just a deviation and frustration settles. The mind snakes, criticizes, demands. There is no room for improvisation, for error, for chance, only for the comparison between the real and what you planned in silence. Diogenes de Sinope, the philosopher who made simplicity his revolution, said that the less one expects, the more free one lives. This phrase, contrary to what it seems, does not preach disinterest. It reveals a possible path, that of lightness, because expectation, when drawn too accurately, becomes prison. You close yourself in it, mold it, and at the slightest sign of frustration you feel betrayed, not by life, but by the projection you created yourself. The mind is skilled in anticipating. Imagine answers, reactions, outcomes. And when the world does not deliver as predicted, it accuses. It says that you have made a mistake, that others have failed, that the universe has failed. But the truth is simpler and harder. No one has promised you what you expected, and yet you have charged. This constant charge turns each day into a test. You don't live, you evaluate. It assesses whether it was enough, if the other matched, if the plan worked out. And when nothing corresponds to the rule you created yourself, what remains is weight, an invisible but real weight. It crosses the body, consumes energy, steals the pleasure of the little things. And the most dangerous thing is that you start to believe that this is normal, that living requires all this effort. But living shouldn't hurt so much, and it hurts to resist. It's to insist on shaping reality to your desire. It's to want life to follow a script that only exists in your head. And when you let go of that control, something inside you starts to breathe. This breath is not withdrawal. It is freedom. Freedom to act with intent, without becoming hostage to the result. Freedom to offer what is best, without expecting immediate return. Freedom to love, to plant, to exist, without charge. Of course, it's not easy. The mind has been trained to seek control. But you can train something else. Trust, delivery, acceptance. Not as passivity, but as courage. Because accepting what is requires more strength than insisting on what has not come. And when you can, even for a moment, Walk without that weight, you realize life didn't get any easier, but it got lighter. And lightness sometimes is all you needed to finally move on without dragging on. I sincerely hope that this message has been helpful. I sincerely wanted to congratulate you for coming this far and completing the video. That means that you want to improve as a person. If you like the video, leave your comment. If you don't know what to say, comment gratitude, then I'll know that you've watched until the end. If you're not already on the channel, what are you waiting for? Sign up now and join us. Stoicism is full of teachings like this, which are applicable to our everyday life. Therefore, I encourage you to continue learning about this philosophy. I leave here 2 videos full of Stoic wisdom so you can continue learning. Until next,